Okay, so we are ready to divide this garment for the front and the back. So your instructions are going to tell you to finish at a certain length at the beginning of the round, and this marker is on actually the side of the sweater. And then it's going to tell you to place the last X number of stitches, 70 something, 80 something stitches on a holder. So I like to use this clover holder. We have these at the shop because it's almost like a darning needle and yarn, which is the other option, but it's got the nice plastic piece to it, so your stitches won't drop as much as they will on yarn. And you can remove your beginning of the round marker, and then you'll just slide these stitches from the needle onto the holder because it wants you to place the last certain number of stitches on a holder. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, so I've got 1/2 of my stitches on a holder, and again, this is the clover stitch holder that I'm using. And one thing to double check at this point, in case you've done your increases incorrectly, or maybe you missed one of your increases, is just make sure that the half of the stitches on the holder, that half ends midway between these side markers. So if you're missing one stitch, you just want to make sure that you're putting this divide exactly where it's supposed to be on each side. And it's okay to be off by 1 or 2. You just want to make sure that your divide is in the middle, or else it won't be under your armpits properly. So now we're working on just this half of the stitches, which is the front half. We'll come back and do the back half later. Your instructions are going to have you bind off a certain number of stitches at the beginning of the next 2 rows. And again, we're going to be working back and forth as if we're doing a flat piece. So you're going to be turning your fabric over and purling back. So on this first knit row, it has you, for my pattern, bind off 3. You want to make sure that you're doing the number that your pattern calls for, or your size calls for. So to count the 3 bind offs, we're not counting the number of stitches we work, we're counting the number of hops that we do. So I have to knit 2 and hop 1 over, and that's 1 bind off. Then I knit 1 more and hop over, that's 2. And I knit 1 more and hop over, and that's 3 bound off. And now I will work to the other end of the fabric, and then I'll turn and come back with a bind off at the beginning of the row. Okay, so I've worked to the end of what's on the needles, and I'm now at the point where the stitches are on the holder, so it's time to turn and work back. So I turn my fabric over, and now I'm going to purl back, and again, I'm going to bind off the first 3 stitches. So it's going to be purl 2 in order to hop 1 over, and that's 1 bind off, 2 bound off, 3 bound off, and then I'm going to purl to the end, and then the next thing we'll start doing is working our armhole decreases. Okay, so now we're back to the beginning of the front of the fabric again, and it wants us to knit 1 and then work a decrease, which is knit 2 together through the back loop. So I'm going to bring this needle through the back loops and then work this decrease as if it were a knit 2 together. So again, I'm going to bring my working needle through the back of the next 2 loops on the left needle. I'm going to wrap the back needle and work as if we're knitting. And then I'll work across the other end, and when we're 3 stitches from the end, we'll work another decrease but slanting in the opposite direction. I'll show you that in just a moment. So here I am at the other end of the front of the fabric. I'm 3 stitches from the end, and I'm going to work the right slanting decrease, which is a knit 2 together, which is to simply put your needle through 2 stitches instead of 1 like you normally would, wrap the back needle, and pop it through. And then you'll just work to the end. You'll notice the big gap where you bound off on the previous row, and you'll turn your fabric and you'll start working back. Depending on your size, you'll work several rows of those decreases happening on the right side of the fabric, which means the flat side of the fabric, and then on the wrong sides you will purl back. So you're going to keep doing that until you get to the neckline, which will be our next video.